Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today I'm coming at you with a What We've Been Playing list. So these are all of the games that we've been playing these last couple weeks. I'm picking about 20 of them, and we're going to talk about them for maybe about a minute each, just get you my thoughts on all of the things that I've been trying out with these new games. Now that being said, there have been 44 different unique titles that we've played this month, and I'll go over all of them at the end of this video. Now that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the list. Now the first game I want to talk about is Cockroach Poker. This continues to be a mainstay when it comes to quick and fun gameplay. This is a bluffing game where you're going to have all of these animal cards, and these animals you're going to be passing to each other, and they have a symbol on them. Very simple. You say, hey, this is a blank, and then the other person has to decide yes or no, or they can look at it and give it to somebody else. Now, this has been really fun to play. I play this with my students at school sometimes when we have a couple minutes left over, but this has been really fun to play with the students and watch them develop the way that they play this, and it's really interesting. They started to notice that they can start counting cards because there's only 8 of each suit. So based on what they have in their hand, they can deduce what other people may or may not have. So it's really fun to see them bluff with confidence or call people out on lies with confidence and get to see them kind of understand and unlock this potential in this game. It's a lot of fun, great for low and high player count games, a great one to just play and enjoy. That is Cockroach Poker. Up next is the game Atlantis Rising 2nd Edition. This game is a wonderful cooperative experience where you play as these leaders using your different followers to go and do different actions in order to escape a flooding Atlantis. Now, you're going to do this in rounds, and every round there's going to be waves that come and sink different portions of this peninsula. Now, right off the bat, the artwork in this game is absolutely wonderful, but the mechanics themselves are very sound. I really like the different peninsula mechanisms here, how the further you are out on these different peninsulas, the easier it is to take the action, or the better the action is. For example, you have a lower number that you have to hit when you're rolling dice in these wild peninsulas, or if you're in the cities, you may draw extra library cards, or you may turn the ore into more pieces of Atlantium. So there's some big considerations and big risks that you need to weigh in order to maximize your actions. Now, the more I play this, the more I really enjoy the library actions. I just think it's so fun to get these one-off superpower abilities and try to see how they're used. I think I just like that in games in general, being able to use special powers and abilities, and this does this in a wonderful manner. Fantastic cooperative game. That's Atlantis Rising 2nd Edition. Up next is the game Coimbra, a dice drafting game where you play in Portugal, and it's your job to use these dice to purchase different nobles to influence and help you around the city side. Now, the game is fantastic right off the bat. This is one of my favorite dice drafting games, and the thing that makes it really unique is the dice that you take determine how much you pay for the different cards. So the cards have this currency listed in the upper left, and that determines how much you're actually going to pay. The dice also explain the initiative order. So the higher the dice, the more you pay, but also you get that first pick. So it's really fascinating, and if it's a tie, the person who went there first gets it. So this is a really cool choice, a really cool decision, and I also like figuring out and using all the different potential options for those cards. This time I played with a huge yellow card strategy, which was a lot of fun. It's not normally something I do, go heavy resources, but this time I was able to do it and claim the win. It was a very different and unique feeling and approach. So that's Coimbra. Up next is the game Word on the Street. Now, this is a word tug-of-war game, and this is fantastic. I really enjoyed this game. This has you playing with this street in the middle. It has all these common letters. A lot of the vowels are taken out and some of the other letters, but the big thing here is you have about 30 seconds to choose a word, and the word will have a category, and whatever word you say, those are the letters that you're going to be pulling towards you. So you're trying to get the letters to come off of the board. So this is a really cool game where you are not only thinking about what words have lots of letters, but what words maybe have double letters, specific letters, because each time that letter appears, that's a tug on your end. This is so cool, so fascinating, because some of your go-to words for these categories you might not want to use just because they don't really pull the specific letters you want. Maybe this K is almost on your opponent's side. You got to figure out something really quickly that uses that double K in order to pull it to your end. This is a wonderful game. That is Word on the Street. Up next is the board game Everdell. This one has you playing as the city builders. It's your job to build lots of buildings and locations, as well as invite people to live in those buildings and locations. Now, this game, the more I play it, the more I do enjoy it, but the more I find some glaring issues with this game, and it's really frustrating and annoying. And these come in the form of some specific cards. Now, these specific cards are the ones that I want to talk about, and mainly there are 2 cards. Honestly, 1 card, and that is the crane here. So there are these blue cards cards in this game that are going to be giving you passive abilities. And that's just what they do. They're very powerful, very strong. You want to get these out early because they're going to give you special effects. Now, a lot of these cards are going to generate you resources when you pass or when you do other things, and that's okay. That's kind of their whole purpose. But some of these are just inherently better than others. And the big one that I want to talk about is the Crane. So the Crane here takes a single rock to play, and its effect says that when you build it, you can, on a future turn, get rid of it and play a new card with 3 fewer resource costs. Now, at the start of the game, this is integral to strategy because it is going to only cost you 1 resource and get you a card that costs 3 more. And it can feel real bad when somebody starts with this and you don't, because at the start of the game, it's a little difficult to get resources. You put a character on a space, gather some resources, and a lot of the resource spaces may only provide 1 or 2. The fact that this card costs only 1 single resource and can provide you with even more is pretty soul-crushing when you are not the one to get it. It feels pretty bad when the next player just happened to have had it in their starting hand, or maybe you took something from the center, which is a risk, I understand that, but it may flop out into the center and they can just play it for free on their turn. It feels pretty dang awful when someone else is getting this ridiculous ability and you aren't. So a little gripe with this game, the Crane, because it does take place of essentially 1 or 2 action spots, gives you some big flexibility, lets you play an Architect for free. If you're familiar with this game, you might find this one really frustrating. Feels really good when you get it, feels not as good when somebody else gets it, and there's 3 copies in this giant deck. So you'll see it when you play it, just something to keep in mind. That's the Crane, that's Everdell. The next game here is Magellan Elcano, a wonderful auctioning game, one that I'm really, really enjoying, and one that I want to keep on playing. This is a really cool system where the cards that you bid for are public to everybody, and whenever you bid, you are bidding for every single auction at the same time. What do I mean by this? When it gets to your turn, you play a card. If it's colored for a specific group of ships, that's what you're bidding for. And you can play your cards, they're multi-sided, so you can play them for the different suits. At the end of the round, once everybody's passed, anybody who's won those bids loses their cards, takes the numbers, but then everybody who lost keeps their cards for the next round. So you have to decide which of these stacks that you're going to want to bid on all at the same time. This is such a cool, refreshing concept for this small type of auctioning game. I love the dual purpose cards, and I love the way this works. I just like how your resources are your resources. That's it. That's all you get for the game. Wonderful game. Magellan Elcano. Up next is the game Dune House Secrets. This is in my favorite type of system, my favorite detective-style game. This is from Portal Games, and this has you playing as characters in the Dune universe. So if you're familiar with the movie, the Harkonnens are doing some bad stuff, and you are a rebel faction kind of fighting against them, and it's your job to kind of figure out what's going on here. You're set on a bunch of different missions. Now, this game has a lot of promise. The theme is very strong. That could be a positive or a negative. So when we played this game, we really liked the theme. However, it really was hard to grasp what was going on, the different text, and it was a bit difficult to actually figure out and kind of see where things were. There was a lot of referencing, trying to figuring out what different things meant, trying to just learn the vernacular of the world. If you're very familiar with Dune, you will not have this issue, most likely. That being said, I also had some other issues with just the pace of the game. There's not a lot of huge decision spaces here. Generally, you're picking 1 or 2 cards. You're losing that location system from the original Dune, which is unfortunate. And then the XP choices are also pretty limited. That being said, there's also this really goofy video thing that you can look at. And most of those are just texts on a video, which is kind of goofy, so I don't even know why that's a thing. But this is one that I'm not super excited to jump back into, unfortunately. I think I would rather spend more time with the other detective cases. So I don't know if or when this one will get finished, but we will probably finish it very soon. So that's Detective Dune. Sorry, not Detective. That is Dune House Secrets. Up next is Sleeping Gods. Finished another campaign of this game and just wanted to kind of give my reports. Now, this one in particular, I made it a mission that we were going to go explore all the dungeons. So this is the Kickstarter exclusive expansion. You go and explore the different dungeons here, and they have you taking this lantern token and going from place to place. There's a bunch of exclusive events to these dungeons. You're going to be getting tokens, special items you wouldn't get anywhere else, as well as different totems in these dungeons. So we went through all the dungeons, had a great time. Some really challenging stuff in here and some really cool scenarios, from the Caldera Fortress, which is volcanic, to the desert. There's all sorts of different areas to explore. This is a great one. Now, I do have a plea from you. If you have this game, I have asked on the forums and no one is able to find it. If you know what adventure card 136 is from this expansion, please let me know. A bunch of people are saying it doesn't exist. That's a lie. I am literally looking at the dungeon cards. So there's a text here that will tell you what it means. If you know what this card is, please let me know. It's a specific card that I really would like to figure out what it is. So I just want to know what the effect is. I've already played like I didn't get it, but if you know what it is, please let me know. That's Sleeping Gods. Amazing game. So excited. I love it so much. Up next is the board game Hallertau, wonderful Euro game of resource management and farming that uses crop rotation as well as these amazing action cards. Now, the way it works is these cards will have conditions on the top here, and the conditions will say that you either need to just have a thing or you got to spend a thing. Some have very weird conditions, like exactly 2 planted fields or something needs to be occupied. So, certain goals that you can potentially reach. If those goals are succeeded, you can trade in the cards for those things. And a lot of these cards have a mixture of instant resources, or they may have ways that you can generate income or lots of points. So there's lots of cool things to kind of chase after as you play. Now, I really like this system. I really like the way it works. And playing this over and over again, the variety from the cards is huge. The scoring and production cards are generally the same, but you're only going to see a couple of those each game. But the different cards that come from each round, these like hat cards as well as the gateway cards that you start with, are going to be drastically different each time. There's about 6 different sets that you can pick from each of these types, so lots of variety. I love this one. Hallertau is one of my favorite games ever, and this is one that I can just see myself keeping on enjoying. So, fantastic game. That is Hallertau. Up next, we have the game Azul. This is a wonderful tile placement game. I had a great time with introducing some new gamers to this, and they enjoyed it a lot. They liked the tactile feelings. It started to click to them after that first round. They were like, oh my gosh, this is how that works. And it was really interesting to see them start to plan, because they realized that, oh, I can't have the same color in column or row. Oh, I got to make sure that I do this. There was some very, very much realization of the choices that they had made earlier that affected their future games. I thought that was really cool to see. Azul remains to be a game that I think is going to continually hit the table. And I'm curious, have you played all the other versions of Azul's? I've actually only ever played this original one because it's so dang good. And I've not had to venture into the others just because it has never come up. So I'm curious, what do you think of these different versions of Azul? Do you prefer the base? Do you prefer another one? Or should I just get all of them and give them a try myself? I'd love to hear what you think. I'm not sure what I would do. Up next is the game Aquatica. Aquatica is an engine building game where you're going to be building a hand of cards and using these cards to take different actions. In addition to the hand of cards you're creating, you're also going to be getting these location cards. And the location cards actually go into your player boards and will slide up. This is a really refreshing and fun mechanic as you're going to be activating combo after combo after combo. It's super fun to be able to time them correctly and really chain to score a lot of points. Now, I really like, as we play this game, we kind of evaluate the cards and we can kind of understand, ooh, this one might be good for that, this one might be good for that. There's just a lot of really cool choices as you play. So having a lot of fun with Aquatica, and particularly the Cold Waters expansion. I just really think it's needed. I love the scoring that it introduces, and I just love the way that it opens the game and actually lets you play. I don't really like the objective scoring in the original game. The game really did end too fast. You could really chain a sequence of events, and it would be over before you started. So, not a big fan of the original, but with Cold Waters expansion, a great game. That's Aquatica Cold Waters. Up next, we have Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria, a worker placement game where you're going to be collecting dice and using the dice for various actions. Now, my favorite part about this game has to be the different item cards that you get. The more and more I play games, the more I realize that I love cards that are going to give you bonuses that are specific to this game. Now, this one gives you extra abilities to reserve cards or extra points. There's lots of different ways to score points, different ways to battle. There's ways that you can make an engine. So you are capped on the amount of cards you can have. You can only have 3, but as you play, you can increase that number. And I like how it kind of pushes you to diversify. If you get all of the same type of card, it actually costs more for each card of that type you get. So I like that it kind of encourages you to take multiple routes. Or if you really do want to commit to a specific strategy, you can. It's just a little bit more difficult. So I like how there's this little bit of tapering there. And the abilities are also a lot of fun. I like how there's just lots of cool effects that you can really pivot on, or you can build your whole strategy around. So Shadow Kings and Valeria, one that I'm still really enjoying. Up next is the game Scythe. Now, Scythe is an awesome system. I really like the way it works. I love how you place the action, do the 2 things, get some upgrades. Feels good to put pieces out on the board, to upgrade yourself over time. But it puts me in a really weird spot where I just think to myself, wow, the best way to win this game is to literally look at the person who's doing the worst and just take everything from them. It doesn't really make me feel good as a player to look at somebody and just make it so they can't play. We played this the other day, and I was sitting next to my friend Jeff, and he just happened to have some resources that I could use, and he didn't really have very much defenses on it, so, I made it my mission, take those things, and it was pretty miserable for him. He really couldn't do much after that. I had depleted his attack stuff, and unfortunately, it's just happened like this. This reminds me of the game Through the Ages a lot, where as soon as somebody falters on military, you can go ahead and pounce on them. You can really start to drain them from points and resources, and it can be really demoralizing for that player. So this inevitably makes it into an arms race where that becomes really your primary focus of this game. You cannot leave your things unattended, you cannot spread out. It really detracts from the game. Otherwise, the person who notices that first on a player will be able to pounce, or realistically the person who's closest to the player who's just kind of leaving resources out. So this is a game that every player really needs to be on that same skill level or skill ceiling. Otherwise, you could really exploit each other. And I guess that's the point of the game, right? Expand, exploit, explore. So unfortunately, big issue with that one there. Another issue that I have with this one is the encounter system, actually. So as you play this game, you're going to be finding these encounter cards. And this is usually, there's one right next to your home base. You're going to get one at the early start of the game that's going to help kickstart your engine. Now, unfortunately, some of these encounter cards are just flat out better than others. And if you get a good encounter card, that can really set the stage for your whole game. This game in particular, I think I got a free enlist or a free mech or something like that. And boom, I think the game was over after that because I had all of this advantage. I had mobility. It was insane. Now, I do want to put some positives, though, and this is a spoiler warning if you don't want to see anything for Rise of Fenris. In the most recent plays of this game, we actually played with the newest factions as well as the alternative ways of scoring. And this most recent one, I got to play as the Fenris faction. Now, I think the Fenris faction is surprisingly balanced. So the way that they work is they put out these negative influence points on the board, and if somebody steps on them, it's -1 coin at the end of the game. So it deters you from messing with them. However, this does not provide any actual resource gain or engine kickstarting for the Fenris faction. So they actually have a bit of a tough time getting started, whereas some other factions have some more mobility and some other things with, subbing resource types, etc. So I really like how that balances. And the biggest thing is that once they finally do create the mech, this gives them some very awkward mobility. So they have this ability called Leap, where they're actually going to be hopping hexes. So they don't have Riverwalk. They have to only move through Leap. And I think that's really fascinating how they've kind of melded the speed and the Riverwalk mechanics into this form. So I really like this faction. I think it's really interesting, very different to think of, but I think this kind of also plays into what I was talking about earlier, where you can really just take down unsuspecting factions, especially since your Riverwalk is a bit more open. So a little bit positives, a little bit negatives here for Scythe, but still a good design, but not one of my favorites. So that is Scythe. Next, we're going to talk about the game Obscurio. In Obscurio, you play a hidden traitor game where you have one character who plays as the book that's trying to escape with you. And they're going to be giving you clues in the form of these giant image cards, very similar to Dixit or things like that. Now, in this game, there's going to be one person that can add these clues to really mess things up. And there also is a time limit on each round. And the more time you take, the harder the next challenge will be. Now, there's a lot of fun things to be had in this game, and the traitor actually works extremely well. I love how once it gets to a certain point, everyone is going to vote on who they think the traitor is. And I love that mechanic, that it actually forces out that person. Now, the cool thing about this game also are the trap tokens. So we played with some of the promo tokens here, and these promo tokens are so fun, particularly this middle one. So this promo token in the middle says that you now will change your roll cards. It only can happen once, and this is the first time I'd ever seen this. And it was really funny because we had played multiple games of this, where the first player who was the traitor in the first game actually turned into the traitor in the second game, and they won both times. It was pretty insane. It was pretty fun, a great time. Obscurio is just one that I'm really having fun with. So I think it's a great take on this system, and I love the traitor mechanic and how well it works. And even if the traitor gets found out, they still get to play, and they can still get to mess with all of the other players. So wonderful game. That is Obscurio. Up next is Anachrony, the David Turczi design from Mind Clash Games that puts you in this time travel setting. It's your job to borrow resources from your future selves to prepare for an oncoming disaster. You do this by loading up into mech suits and going out and taking on the challenges out in the polluted world, as well as sending all of your workers in your home base to run the buildings you've constructed. In this game, we played with the Pioneers of the New World module, and that's one that I'm really having fun with. This gives you a special little board down here where you are going to be powering up your mech suits, and the way you do this is by slotting in different cubes, so upgrades. The more upgrades you have, the more strength you have when you go out on these challenges. In addition to that, you can also get extra science tokens on your board, which let you draw additional adventure cards. So when you actually go to the board, you pick a specific type of adventure, a small one or a big one, you compare your strength value, and if you get it, you win some cool reward. Now, when you go for the higher strength values, some are extremely powerful, so I really like having those science tokens so you can draw out multiple cards. It's just a great system. Anachrony continues to be one that I enjoy, and I've actually recently bumped my rating of this game from a 9 to a 10 because I love how straightforward and simple the core system is, even though it is extremely complex and complicated. This is one you can plug and play expansion modules as you see fit, so we played this one without the fractures of time this time, and still had an absolutely fantastic experience with it. I love how you can really tailor make this game to your experience, and it's one that you can really enjoy. So that's Anachrony. Up next is Cloudage. Cloudage has you playing as the captain of an airship. You're going to be going around harvesting the clouds for water, as well as visiting the land below for extra points or resources. Now, this game features the Alexander system of playing lots of project cards to develop your own tableau of special abilities and powers, but it does it in a very simplified way. The turn structure is very straightforward, moving, activating, and inflicting combat. And the way you do this is with an action deck of cards. Now, you have a standard action deck, and it's kind of a deck building style, and during the game, you're going to be able to add more cards to your deck that give you special abilities or just higher numbers. That being said, I really like this resource gathering system. On your turn, after everybody has moved and battled and visited areas, everybody's going to get an action, and they'll be able to do either exploring on one of these cards or being able to play some cards from hand or something like that. So when you actually play, you actually are going to choose one of these cloud cards and you'll pick a type, but the clouds obscure some of the information. So I really like this system. It's just really fun, a great way of pushing your luck. You can choose icons based on the bonuses they give or just by how much space they take up on the card, because the amount of space is going to determine how many resources you get. And this is a cool game with a lot of following mechanics, so if I choose something, everyone else gets to hop on afterwards. So it's a great little system, and I really like the way it works, and I like how the person who chooses the action, in addition to getting first pick of the resources, they also are going to add that card to their deck. Great system, fantastic little game. I really like Cloudage. Up next, we have the Anniversary Edition for Castles of Burgundy. Now, this is a condensed version with new artwork that includes all of the expansions in one box, and that is so cool right off the bat. Now, this version in particular adds a brand new expansion as well, which come in the form of these shield tiles. And the way they work is you're going to randomly get 6 of them and put them on the depots, so on all the numbers, 1 through 6. Now, during the game, if anybody rolls doubles, and you can use workers to choose this, you can actually take one of these tiles. At the end of every round, for each tile that you have to pay a coin. So you got to make sure you can keep these. But they will give you amazing abilities. There are some tiles that'll let you get extra tiles and immediately place them. There are some tiles that'll make it so that your mines produce twice. There's some that say that every time opponents get workers, you get workers. These tiles are insane, and on top of all that, they give you extra end-of-game points, so it really is beneficial to grab one of these earlies. But you got to make sure that you can actually afford and pay for it. The other cool restricting factor of this is you actually have to put the tiles onto the castles. Now, I really, really like this expansion. I honestly feels like super science tiles to me. You're going to get some cool effect that no one else has, and I like that it's kind of a race and first come, first serve. But to get them, it's a pretty big commitment having to give up your whole turn, as well as making sure that you're fixing your dice in order to get the tile you actually want. So I like this system. I think it's a lot of fun, and I love that all of the expansions are just included in here and so easy to integrate. So that is Castles of Burgundy Anniversary Edition. Up next, we have Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. It continues to be my favorite social deduction game. This is such a brilliant design that continuously keeps people engaged, brings its own arc to its story, and allows you to make actual decisions based on the evidence that you're given. So this game has you playing with one forensic scientist who's going to be giving clues using these large tablet cards. And these tablets will give the cause of the death, the location where it happens, and then lots of various other information. Every player is going to have evidence and murder weapons in front of them, and the whole idea is the forensic scientist is answering things that'll help you determine who the murderer is based on those weapons and evidence they have. This is such a solid system. Now, as I alluded to earlier, I really like the way that this game creates its own arc over time. You start off with the cause of death, and already you're talking about the different murder weapons at the board. And then you get the location, and maybe that's where the evidence comes in, or even more information on the murder weapon. You're not sure, so you're talking, you're discussing, you're looking at everybody's items, you're trying to piece things together. I love this system, and it just works so, so well. The game involves critical thinking and also trying to piece together this story that the forensic scientist is telling you. Wonderful experience. If you have not played this, I strongly recommend it. That's Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Next, we have Imperium Classics and Imperium Legends. This is a pair of games that is a deck-building civilization game where you're trying your best to get through your deck as much as possible so you can develop your nation into this awesome, developed, civilized city. So you're going to take a faction and then do your best to use its faction abilities to add new cards to your deck from this open market. I was lucky enough to get to teach this game to my wife over the weekend, and she really enjoyed it. She liked the idea of having her own civilization that she got to manage, and the biggest interaction was racing for those cards in the center. So I really enjoy this at the 2-player and solo counts. It does drag on pretty long with the downtime in the 3+ modes, but the 2-player works extremely well. You could do a lot of hate purchasing, hate drafting. There's lots of cards that can potentially earn big scoring amounts, so having that 2-player aspect here really adds some tension when you're wanting to get specific cards that are out in the market. So I really like how that kind of ramps up the interaction with this public market here. I also really enjoyed just how powerful the purple cards feel. So during the game, there are ways, I think it's called Glory, where you can get rid of a couple of your conquered lands, these yellow cards, and they'll go into your discard pile. And remember, you're trying to get through your deck as much as possible, so if you add cards to your discard pile, they're going to get put back in your deck, so it'll be harder to get through. But in exchange, you get one of these big, fantastic, powerful purple cards, and these give you some really, really awesome ability, or just a whole bunch of points. So it feels really, really good to get one of these purple cards, and every time you do it, it's just such a satisfying feeling. I really like that part of this game. So I'm happy that I got to show this to my wife, and we had a great time with it. So excited to play more of this. One of my favorites from this year. That's Imperium Classics and Legends. And the last game is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. This is an app-driven game where you play as investigators who are cooperatively working to solve some sort of case. Now, we actually played the last mission that I had that was on my 2 playlists, so we've played all the content for this now, and that was in the Forbidden Journeys expansion. This one contains an adventure where you're actually going to have a hidden traitor amongst the group. You're playing on a ship, and all chaos is going loose as you're not sure who to trust in this scenario. It introduces some cards that allow you to bind or restrict the other players, so I like that there is actually some agency given to the players to try to deduce who's who, and you can actually do something about it and prevent them from ruining your game. Now, this one had some really interesting ways that you could actually use the app to hide your traitorness, or it may give you the app and you secretly type in something. There was just so many cool little things that they did that I think are really positive for the hidden traitor mechanic, and I think could be used in other games really well. Now, unfortunately, one of the biggest issues for this game came from the thematic nature, and that is the water tiles. This is a 3-hour experience, and during this 3 hours, you're going to be interacting with a lot of water spaces. And these water spaces essentially mean that when you move, you only get to move a single space, and you stop if you step in the water, which is really frustrating, especially with this long experience if you're doing most of your time just moving a step at a time on your turn. So unfortunately, a little frustrating. There are some items that can help with that, but generally just one. So you really want to know what you're getting into before you start this one, because that can definitely happen. So I'm not sure if this is one that I'm going to revisit, but it is definitely one that has a lot of cool ideas. I like the way that the trader mechanic works, and I feel that in the future, when I do teach this, I'll make sure that I stress the importance of the water spaces and getting bogged down. I think that will help out with the game experience, so when I teach others this game, they'll have a great time with it. So that is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. And those are the games. That's what we've been playing this last 2 weeks. So we're going to quickly go through the full list of those 44 unique titles. So we've played Cascadia, Cockroach Poker, Cartographers, Capital X2, Atlantis Rising, Coimbra, Viticulture, Word on the Street, Las Vegas Royale, Everdell, BoonLake, Magellan, Messina 1347, Dune House Secrets, Sleeping Gods, Illusion, Hadrian's Wall, Wingspan, Terraforming Mars, Hallertau, Azul, Clever Cubed, Aquatica, Bullet Heart, The Crew, Mission Deep Sea, Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria, Spyfall, Scythe, Obscurio, Startups, Anachrony, Cloudage, Ex Libris, Regicide, Castles of Burgundy, Nidavellir, Mysterium Park, Zombicide 2nd Edition, Deception Murder in Hong Kong, Imperium Legends, Classics, Dune Imperium, Marvel Champions, Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition, and Nemesis. So those are all the games that we've been playing the last 2 weeks. What have you been playing? What games from our library are you interested in playing? Are there any of these games that you have opinions on, disagree, agree with my opinions? I'd love to hear what you think. But thank you so much for tuning in and watching SideGame Strong.